The Wars of the Roses were a very turbulent time in which the crown of England changed hands between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. The dynastic struggle between the two sides of the Plantagenet family led to hundreds being killed in battles over the decades. But one man who can be considered to have been partially a victor in the conflict was Edward IV. He managed to dethrone Henry VI following heavy defeats to the Lancastrian forces at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross and later Towton. But in 1483 he died under rather mysterious circumstances and also died very suddenly. This plunged England into more turbulence, as following his death, his successor Edward V and his brother, who were waiting for their coronation inside of the Tower of London, mysteriously went missing and disappeared. This was known as the Princes in the Tower mystery, with Richard III then claiming the throne for himself. But what is the true story behind Edward IV's death? Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Edward IV came onto the throne first in 1461, but in 1470 he was briefly deposed by Henry VI, the very man he kicked off the throne. And then he reigned again in 1471 to 1483. The Wars of the Roses led to the thrones shifting between Edward and Henry, and Edward had inherited his Yorkist claim to the throne from his father Richard, the Duke of York. Edward did defeat the Lancastrians heavily at the Battle of Towton, which was referred to as the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil, with up to 20,000 people being killed. He secretly married Elizabeth Woodville, the widow of a Lancastrian knight, which upset his key ally, the Earl of Warwick, also known as the Kingmaker. Edward did face rebellion during his time on the throne, and this in particular came from Warwick, who later turned against him, and his own brother George Plantagenet, the Duke of Clarence. George eventually was executed for treason, being drowned in a barrel of Malmsey wine. Edward's court was stated to have been one of the most splendid in the whole of Christendom, and he spent large sums of money on symbols, showing his wealth as the King of England. Much of his reign was well documented by historians, but his death still remains much of a mystery today. The king died around the 9th of April 1483 at the Palace of Westminster, and it's considered that his death was unexpected and it took many by surprise. Edward IV was ill around the end of March, but despite having access to the best doctors and care, he did succumb to whatever it was that ended his life. His death was reported and minuted on the 9th of April, and it was said, Lord Audley and Lord Berkeley, now early this morning by the assent of the King's Council, sent unto the Mayor for to show and give knowledge that the King is passed out of his present life this last night. Before the sudden death of Edward IV, it was also been written that Edward was not suffering with ill health, but it was noted that the King had a strong appetite. It was said by an adviser he was wont to show himself to those who wished to watch him, and he seized any opportunity that the occasion offered of revealing his fine stature more protractedly and more evidently to onlookers. However, in food and drink he was most immoderate. It was his habit, so I have learned, to take an emetic for the delight of gorging his stomach. Once more for this reason he had grown fat in the loins, but he was a tall man, and very fat, though not to the point of deformity. Different sources do give different accounts of Edward, as another said how he was of visage lovely, of body mighty, strong and clean made, and he was of youth, greatly given by fleshly wantonness, from which health of the body, in great prosperity and fortune, without a special grace hardly refraineth. So with these we can establish that the king, despite being slightly overweight around the time he died, was not suffering with an ailment for too long. Different historians have debated Edward's true cause of death, and some believe that he was rumoured to be poisoned, but others also say that it was caused by a chill or a short illness, or even that the king died of sadness. It was also believed that Edward's death was brought on by the lifestyle he was living, a rather debaucherous one. There have been allegations that he was poisoned, and one historian believed he was poisoned with arsenic or some heavy metal. But from what we know about Edward's death, is that he took to his bed around Easter Sunday on the 20th of March 1483, and that within 10 days he was dead. However, from what we know about Edward's death, is that he took to his bed around Easter Sunday 1483, and that within 10 days he was dead. His passing was said to have taken the royal court by surprise, and after he died, his body was left naked for viewing, and this showed there was no violent end to King Edward IV, with no trauma or injury to his body. There were also no noted signs of disease, for example mumps, smallpox, measles, and even the bubonic plague, which would have left some signs on his body. Also, this ruled out other afflictions that were caused by bleeding under the skin, so he was not killed by leukemia or haemophilia. As the king also was noted to have been in good standing, it's unlikely that he died from a disease such as cancer that led to him wasting away, or undiagnosed diabetes. Also, it's interesting that a stroke or heart attack did not kill Edward, as the timescale of his illness denotes that there was not a sudden event that killed the king, neither was there a long drawn-out process and suffering that went on for months. Polydore Virgil states how Edward fell sick of an unknown disease, and another states how he died from a mix of sadness and a cold he caught whilst out fishing. An English chronicler wrote, however it was the melancholy and anger that he took with the French king, or were it by any other means, he suddenly fell sick, and was with a grievous malady taken, yes, so previously taken that his vital spirits began to fail and wax feeble. But none of this points towards a certain cause of death, and that is what the issue is around King Edward IV's death. So much of his story in the Wars of the Roses is recorded, but his final days were not, which further points to his death being a surprise. It's believed that as the king's health was beginning to fail, that he became subject to a number of different potions and ailments that were used by his doctors. This included emetics, which made him go to the toilet and also vomit, which then furthermore allowed Edward to feel empty in his stomach, and then it's believed he ate more and consumed more because of this. He would consume a large amount of food at royal banquets, and then throw up, and then go back to eat again, all of which was very dangerous. He was known for this before he fell fatally ill, but his cause of death remains a mystery. As mentioned, poison was believed to have been a possible cause, but this is most likely a theory that arose because of no obvious cause of death, and at the time this was attributed to deaths, especially of high-profile members of society, who had no signs before their shocking death. It's also been suggested that Edward died from malaria or pneumonia, but these diseases and symptoms of them have been around for centuries, and although treatments were not great, they could have easily been described. We have accounts of other royals and kings who passed away of illnesses decades and centuries before Edward, but this leads us to the contemporary account, from Edward's time, that his listed cause of death was apoplexy, which was brought on by excess and consuming food and drink to a huge amount. It was referred to as a sudden death that started with a lack of consciousness, in which the victim died after losing consciousness. It's what today would be classified as a stroke, or the rupturing of an internal organ. It's believed that Edward's lifestyle mixed with apoplexy could have been what killed him. It's clear that his health had been damaged by years of his debaucherous lifestyle, eating and drinking to excess, and as he gained a large amount of weight, it's believed this would have led to his downfall. Edward IV died at the age of 40, which was modest for a person living in the 15th century, but for a king it was still rather young. Following his death, his funeral cortege left passing Westminster Abbey, Sion Abbey, and it came to rest at Windsor Castle on the 19th of April. The chapel of St George he had commissioned to be built had not yet been finished, but the choir aisles had been roofed with timber, and the stalls were in place. Edward was brought to St George's Chapel to be buried, and the service was held, and he was buried in a tomb in the north choir aisle, and it was an elaborate burial complete with his jewelled sword and cap and his armour. These stayed until they were taken during the English Civil War. His tomb has been opened since, as on the 13th of March 1789, renovations were taking place at the chapel, and it was accidentally opened. A chamber contained the lead coffin of Edward IV, where his remains along with his queen, Elizabeth Woodville, were inside. It was noted that Edward's remains showed him to be around 6 feet 3 inches tall, which was huge for a 15th century man, and this made him one of history's tallest monarchs. So with regards to what killed Edward IV, we are none the wiser. There are many different proposals put forward, but what it was that led him to live his last 10 days bedbound, and also in a significant degree of discomfort and pain, remains a mystery. Some historians even debate the date of his death, saying he died sooner, but he did die from an unknown illness. It's not believed that he was murdered by poisoning, but more that his debaucherous lifestyle of overeating and drinking, followed by the purging medication he was given, could have caused a significant rupture or injury to his internal organs that caused his death. Edward IV is remembered for being one of the key players of the Wars of the Roses, and certainly one of the winners, as he managed to instill a period of dominance for the House of York. This would only be ended when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III on the battlefield and began one of history's most infamous eras, the Tudor period. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.